Roger, thank you very much for agreeing to participate in this oral history interview for the Page Center at Penn State University. You graduated from Ohio State with a degree in journalism and started your career as a reporter, I believe, in Marion, Ohio. What led you to choose ultimately public relations as a career field?
It was an accident. I thought I wanted to be a I did want to be a journalist, and it was all I really wanted to be. And frankly, I had trouble finding my next job after Marion. And I loved the work, but the next job just wasn't forthcoming. So I quit my job, moved to Washington because I had a friend there, and I figured I'd find something. Went to talk to the congressman who I'd been covering as a reporter just to let him know I was in town, looking for a job. If you know anybody, make any introductions for me. He said, how would you like to be my press secretary? And I said, I'm going to have to think about that, because I knew it probably meant the end of my journalism career. But at 25 years old, the chance to be a press secretary to a U.S. congressman was too good to pass up. Took the job and immediately discovered that I loved being on the inside as opposed to being on the outside looking in. And I used the same skills and the same focus on facts and truth and telling a story, but on behalf of as opposed to covering.
Had you had any interest in politics before that point in time, or was that the introduction?
No, I was hooked on politics from 10 years old, which in turn is why I got interested in journalism, because it was a way to be involved in politics.
How did you transition from the congressman's office to the White House experience? What happened in that?
Well, that was a long path. I had worked for the congressman for 8 years. I was his chief of staff ultimately. And after he left the Congress, I bounced around in a couple of little jobs. Ended up working for the Reagan-Bush re-election campaign in 1984, which was just an incredible experience. And from there went into the Reagan administration, served in the White House for a brief period, and also served in the Bush administration.
What talent did you have at that point in time in your career that was desired by the political people that you worked with?
That's a great question. Not sure I know. I mean, the fundamental skill that I feel that on which I've based my whole career is writing, but I think it's more than that. I think it's the ability to think clearly, to understand complex issues, and to really understand how constituencies react to the actions of major institutions. And that's really what politics is all about, and that's what public relations is all about.
I imagine that working in the Reagan White House was pretty much of a heady atmosphere and experience in itself. At one time, I think you wrote speeches, and then what were some of the other specific activities that you were involved with while you were there?
Well, I wrote speeches for the Reagan-Bush re-election campaign. In fact, my title was Director of Speech Writing. Not writing for the president, but really for surrogates. So when Senator Dole, for example, went out on behalf of the campaign, or cabinet member so-and-so went out on behalf of the campaign, they were provided with speeches by my office, as well as talking points, issue backgrounders. I had a small group of writers who wrote basically all of the substantive material that the candidates used during the campaign. Then when I was in the administration, I was Assistant U.S. Trade Representative for Public Affairs and Public Liaison. In essence, the press secretary to the U.S. Trade Representative. Also ran an extensive group of advisory committees that we used to get private sector input into government trade-making policy.
Did you have a specific interest in business or in trade before that happened, or was that just something that just evolved while you were there?
Well, what evolved, Jack, was when I was back on the Hill, the congressman that I worked for was ranking on the Energy Committee during the energy crisis, the first energy crisis, if you will, in the Carter years. And he was also ranking on the Joint Economic Committee. And so I found myself really drawn to economic issues. And my first job in the administration was at Treasury. Then I moved to USTR, and then to the White House, where I was special assistant to the president with responsibility for economic policy issues, public liaison on economic policy issues, and then back to Treasury again. So my whole government career was really focused around economic policy issues.
Well, I understand that you would have been appointed by the president for the assistant treasury job, or
Correct.
assistant secretary, I guess.
Correct.
For the Treasury Department.
Yes.
Was that something you had to be confirmed at? You go
Yes.
through. How was that experience?
It was quite an honor, actually, to be nominated by the President of the United States to serve the country. And my nomination required confirmation by the Senate. So I prepared brief remarks. I was introduced by a senator and was asked a series of questions by a number of senators, and then subsequent to that there was a vote in the Senate that confirmed me as the President's nominee for that role.
If you hadn't had the career that you already had, what would you have liked to have done? You like being a cowboy or a sailor?
No, you know what? I started out to be a journalist, and my career went this direction, and I don't regret it for 1 second. But if I could have seen my journalism career through and seen where it would have led, that would be interesting to me.